All right, well, we are back. My name is Amanda Williams, and I'm here with Jim Zobel, we are both historians here at the MacArthur Memorial. And today we're going to be talking about the Battle of Manila. And to date, this battle is the US military's largest and most intense experience of urban warfare. There are about 6,500 American military casualties, about 16,000 Japanese military killed in action, and an absolutely staggering number of civilians that are killed and wounded. Now, Manila, as it was the Pearl of the Orient prior to this war, and after this battle, Manila is absolutely devastated. And I think even against the backdrop of tremendous worldwide suffering and horror in World War II, and even the millions of civilians killed around the world during this war, Manila really stands out as an absolutely terrible tragedy. And it's a battle that more people should, quite frankly, know more about. So today we're going to talk a little bit about it. So, Jim, why don't we set the stage here? What's happening in the Philippines in 1945, beginning of the year? Where are MacArthur's forces, and what is the status of Manila?
The battle on Leyte is coming to an end. MacArthur's forces had landed there in October, and you've got in December they turned all operations over to Eighth Army because Sixth Army is what's going to land at Lingayen Gulf, and that's where the main invasion of Luzon is going to happen. Because of the Battle of Leyte, Yamashita is the commander in the Philippines on the 14th Army. That's Tomoyuki Yamashita. He had just gone in there in October. But he knows because of Leyte, they're not going to be able to put up like a mobile defense. And so now he's looking just basically to hold on as long as possible to delay the Americans from going on to Japan. So you're going to have in early January or late December the last big supply runs from Japan coming into the Philippines, and they're landing in that San Fernando area, which is right up on the coast of Lingayen Gulf, and they bring in the 19th Division right after Christmas. And I think that when those Oriyoko Maru survivors left, they left on the ships that had brought in that 19th Division,
Mhm.
and after early January, one of the last big convoys, it gets obliterated by air power up there. So nobody's going to be leaving the Philippines anymore as far as Japanese. Nobody's going to be coming in. So Yamashita has divided his forces into these three groups, which will go into the mountains and hold off as long as possible. But there is the division between Japanese Army, Japanese Navy, and Yamashita does not have control of those naval forces, even though the Admiral Okawachi is going to leave Manila and go to Baguio on the north of Luzon with Yamashita. There are going to be about 16,000 Marines left there under this Admiral Sanji Iwabuchi. And he is put in command of those groups there. Now, the one group of Japanese that are right east of Manila is under this guy Yokoyama, who's lieutenant general, and he's got his group there to hold off in the mountains, and he takes control of that Iwabuchi group, and he says to them, "Deny Manila Bay." Destroy everything there, but he doesn't give them the order like to die to the death. So the thing is that nobody in the American side really knows what's going on in Manila. You've got a lot of guerrillas telling MacArthur that troops have moved up north, and so that's what he's going to be thinking when they go in there. But as it is, on January 9th, the Sixth Army will land with about 75,000 troops, and then you're going to have that battle ending on Leyte.
So, just moving to MacArthur, what is he thinking at this point? Now, you and I, we study him all the time. And so I think we know he's very nostalgic. He's very attached to place and the memories that he has in certain places. And Manila is obviously very personal. It's very special to him. He courted Jean there. Arthur is born there. It's where many friends lived and he hopes are still alive there in January 1945. So I think there's no question he wants to get to Manila as quickly as possible. But describe his frame of mind for us and what does he want to see at this point in terms of operations and the taking of the city?
Well, you're exactly right. He's all he thinks about is Manila. January 1st, late December, they had finally gotten the word from the guerrillas on Palawan about the massacre there. The Japanese killed about 150 American prisoners of war there, and a handful of them escaped and made it to the guerrillas. So going into Lingayen, MacArthur knows that they have pulled off this extermination at a prisoner of war camp. There are about 5,000 civilians at Santa Tomas. There's another 500 at Bilibid prison that had just been brought there over Christmas. That was after that last contingent of POWs left Bilibid to go to Japan. There's about another 1,200 military prisoners still there at Bilibid. They think Bilibid's been emptied, but they know that all those people are at Santo Tomas, the prisoners. And so MacArthur also knows that Cabanatuan is still open. There's, a handful of American prisoners there, about 500. So he wants to drive south. The guerrillas have told him that people are already dying of starvation within Manila. They are not getting the food they need. And that's why I always say that, it's a good thing that the Americans did go back when they did, because you would have had a million people dying of starvation if they hadn't. And so he knows he has to get there early. When they first come in at Lingayen Gulf, Ultra, the code breaking organization, Ultra, that's producing that Ultra intelligence, they've deciphered that the Japanese army has closed offices in Manila. They've all gone north. They also know that Yamashita has pulled out all the civilian Japanese workers in Manila. They've all gone north as well. A lot of the civilians are going to, blame him because so many of them die up there in the northern reaches. And they said there was, no reason to take them out. As well, the code rooms of the Japanese have closed in Manila. And so MacArthur is thinking that they've pretty much pulled out of the city. Now, you've got most of your guerrillas saying that there's no food in there, but they are seeing that they have set up some tank traps in Manila. They are seeing that there's a agent named Vanderpool that goes into the Philippines, and he hooks up with those guerrillas that are down south, like the hunters groups and President Quezon's own guerrillas. And he's saying that they are building all these pillboxes on the south of the city at Fort McKinley. And we know that's where the Japanese thought that the Americans would come, was from the south. And so they were expecting that. They took all that hardware off all those sunken ships in Manila Bay, put them all down there. And so MacArthur is thinking they need to get there as fast as possible before the Japanese can really establish their defense. And so that's what he's thinking. As well, Robert Lapham, who's one of the great guerrilla commanders there, he was in the plains of the Tarlac Plain, and he said that if the Americans had gone straight to Manila, they would have not avoided the battle. And that was his belief the whole time. That's what his guerrillas were telling him as well. This is what MacArthur believes. But when they land, you've got Walter Kruger, who's 6th Army commander, has very different ideas from MacArthur. And so he's going to say that, no, he's not going to make that drive on Manila until he's got forces sufficient to be able to secure that Lingayen base where they have landed.
Right. And so you brought up Kruger. He obviously has a little bit different idea than MacArthur. And then, of course, there's General Griswold. Sure. You've got Lieutenant General Oscar Griswold there as one of the kind of key commanders on the ground under Kruger and MacArthur. So expound a little bit more on Kruger and what Griswold are thinking. Sure. And how it's different.
Well, when they landed on Lingayen, the 1st Corps in a Swift is on the left side, and Griswold's 14th Corps with the 37th, 40th Division is on the right side. And immediately on those landings, the Japanese were hitting them on that left side, as they're making those landings. And they have a tough fight immediately when they get off, because the Japanese have pulled up into the mountains that are, off to the flank of Lingayen Gulf. And so 1st Corps has a very intense fight that almost takes off from the beginning. They have to start climbing into those hills to start suppressing the Japanese. That I think you've got elements of this 357th Independent Mixed Brigades, elements of the 19th before they move out north, and they're going to be holding them off. Whereas Griswold's Corps, the 14th Corps, they're able to push inland very fast. And so they are pushing in, and their left flank is wide open because the First Corps can't keep up with them. So what Kruger wants to do is he wants to wait till the 1st Cavalry and the 32nd Division, who are still in operations on Leyte, they're going to land in late January, and he wants to wait till they get there so he can secure that flank and make a drive on Manila without worrying about Yamash's forces pouring out, because he doesn't know, what they're up to. This really gets under MacArthur's skin. He's constantly pressuring Kruger to get the drive going. Griswold is able to push, but he doesn't want to push too fast because his left flank is wide open, because First Corps can't keep up with that. And so MacArthur will constantly push Kruger. His chief of staff, Sutherland, is constantly saying, fire Kruger, but MacArthur will never order him what to do. MacArthur will say, I have to figure out another way to get him moving. He'll never order Kruger to do his bidding. And that's what Kruger always says, that even if MacArthur was totally mad at him, he wouldn't order him out of his frame of mind. So that is basically the reason why they don't make the drive early enough. But once they get those troops there, that 1st Cavalry and the 32nd, then Kruger will decide to make that move down into Manila.
All right, I'm going to digress for a moment because I want to ask a question about this relationship with Kruger. And I know we've covered MacArthur and Kruger in another episode, but why do you think he doesn't replace him then? Do you think it's because he truly trusts him, and maybe he remembers his own time as maybe a brigade commander and thinking, on a smaller level, like he knows better than me? I mean, do you think is that his way of kind of saying, I'm maybe not right about this, so I'm not going to fire you, I'm just mad at you?
Yeah, I mean, it has to do a lot with the respect that they hold for each other. I mean, they're only a year apart, and Kruger plans all MacArthur's operations. I mean, they give him the staff studies, but he's the one that coordinates all this stuff. And even though MacArthur's furious at him, and you've still got Sutherland saying get rid of him, MacArthur gives Kruger that 4th star. Mm-hmm. General Eichelberger, who runs 8th Army and is a lieutenant general, he won't get that. And he's always, more like, sure, boss, whatever you need. And so I think it has a lot to do with the respect that MacArthur holds for him. And Kruger's not a West Point guy. He was a Mustang. Came up through the ranks. He was in the Philippines in 1890s. With the first Philippine-American War that happened over there. I just think he has, even though he's totally mad at him, and I think he just has that respect for Kruger that he doesn't hold for Eichelberger. But I mean, he'll play the two off each other constantly, and he'll go to Eichelberger and be like, Kruger's an old man, I can't get him to do anything. You got to be my Stonewall Jackson, and that's what he'll say to Eichelberger to get him all hyped up,
Yeah, he respects Griswold too, though, I guess, because I mean, he will continue to recommend him for things.
Yes, he thinks Griswold is one of his best corps commanders. Right. And he said, Griswold was first with that South Pacific force under Halsey and had done all that great work on those island chains coming up through the Solomons. And once that gets put under MacArthur will rank him as one of his best. Mm. Yeah.
All right. Well, you've already touched on this a little bit, but here you are. You've got, MacArthur, these generals. They're planning to kind of move into the city, lay out where the Japanese are again, and what's going on with them.
They've divided up this naval force into these separate battalions. They'll take positions within the city. They've now built every giant concrete building into a fortification. You've got these other naval battalions down south. You've got this army group Kobayashi force up north, which is going to start all the fires as soon as the Americans get down there. What happens is after that first cavalry and the 32nd land, Kruger will tell the first cavalry, create this flying column, and I'm going to send you down to Manila. MacArthur comes right after Kruger's there and tells Vern Mudge, who's the commander of the first cavalry division, go to Manila, bounce off the Japanese, move around them, free the hostages at Santo Tomas, and take over Malacañan Palace. And so they'll create this serial of a squadron. There's 2 squadrons to a cavalry regiment. It's about 850 guys. They put the 44 Tank Battalion with them, and they'll have a Marine Air Corps that will work with them as they're going down into Manila. But at the same time, MacArthur goes to Robert Beetler, who runs the 37th Division that had pushed through Clark Field, taken all that area. And MacArthur will say, I want you to be first in Manila. Robert Beetler's an old 42nd Division, Rainbow Division guy from World War I. MacArthur knows him very well. And so it's, using these people as a rivalry to get them to push in, don't let the 1st Cavalry beat us and don't let the 37th. The 1st Cavalry will make their move into Manila. They get in there, crossing these bridges. Vern Mudge even goes on the bridge and throws dynamite off, on one of them. And, you're going to lose your 44 Tank Battalion commander, Lieutenant Colonel Ross. The amount of battalion commanders that are going to be lost in this Battle of Manila is really staggering, showing that, it's not just the privates and everybody up front. Everybody's, in the middle of this thing. They get down to Manila, and MacArthur thinks that they're going to be able to walk right into the city and take it over. It hasn't, dawned in his head that the Japanese are really ensconced in there. He comes to Santo Tomas on 7 February. They had, been liberated on the 3rd. The 37th Division had gone in, liberated all those people at Bilibid prison the next morning. And so even though they've got him, MacArthur comes to visit Santo Tomas, and right after he leaves, the Japanese start shelling it, killing a lot of prisoners, and the fires start. They burn the whole north of the city. But MacArthur has gone back to his Hacienda Luisito, which is up in Tarlac, pretty far away. And he had been there with Griswold that day at the Santo Tomas, thinking, boy, the city's so quiet, we can just move across the Pasig and take it. And Griswold was like, no, this thing is gonna explode. And I don't think it's till Bill Dunn, who's that CBS guy, who's up in the city the whole time, gets back there on like the 10th at Tarlac and tells everybody in the staff, this is not going to go well. MacArthur had announced the city was taken on the 7th, and you've got 3 weeks of some of the most brutal fighting that's ever happened. And so he believed, I think, that they would get there, and because there was no reason to defend it. It was just nihilistic. It was completely, the place is flat. There's no defensible properties. You're going to lose. But the Japanese had gone there, and they situated themselves to last for the next 6 months as far as food. And so people say they should have just bypassed the city. They couldn't. The Japanese were going to kill everybody anyway. And the atrocities start as soon as the Americans get there. Fort Santiago massacre, the German Club massacre, the Red Cross massacre, the church massacres. It's just insanity, and it didn't make any sense at all. And I think that's why MacArthur was so adamant that they wouldn't defend it, because there was no reason to do it. And Yamashita never declared it an open city because he said that would, show bad face. If we did that, even though MacArthur had done that. So, Yamashita will come out later on saying, I told them to leave. I didn't know what was going on. Yokoyama had that message to him, defend these places, but it wasn't like a to the death order. But that's what Ibuchi's going to make it. And so you're going to have, they say up to 100,000 people murdered in the city. Because of this, MacArthur won't let them bomb the city aerially, but he'll give them go ahead to plaster the place with artillery, because they've really, that's what they have to do.
It seems like he comes to this in phases, though. You think February 3rd, 4th, you've got Santo Tomas, Bilibid, being liberated. Yeah. And then as you said, on February 7th, he announces that the city's been taken. Um, and then it just seems to be like this realization that that's not what's happening on the
Yeah.
ground. Do you think he's just very disconnected from what's happening on the ground? If he's going back, if he's not in Manila after
Yeah,
these
I think,
liberations?
and we've talked about this before. I think MacArthur does his best to will things to happen,
Mm.
you know, and I think that was, he had just had it in his mind that there was no reason why they would do this. It's not going to happen. It's going to be empty, and he's wrong, and then it just, you've got a bludgeoning drive by the 37th across the Pasig. The 1st Cavalry is going to swing south and then move across the city. And the 11th Airborne is going to come in from the south, and they're going to have to fight for every single inch.
Mm.
Yeah.
Why don't you walk us through some of that fighting to the actual end of the battle?
Well, the 37th is going to, there's this island in the middle of the Pasig River. It's kind of like an energy provisor island. They're going to pump about 1,200 shells in there, and it's still not going to kill all the Japanese. You have to go and get them out. They'll hold these, like, police stations, the University of the Philippines, the Philippine Hospital. They're all buried in it. They've barricaded them out. They've, created tunnels and passageways through these places, and they're there to fight to the death. And so it's going to take almost 3 weeks, 2.5 weeks to move through the city and finally come up Dewey Boulevard and take, the Army Navy building and the Manila Hotel and all that. First Cav going into there, moving through the hospitals in Malate in the central part of the city, and then they have to go into Intramuros, which is that walled city, and they're going to have to obliterate that. They'll bring in all those Japanese Nisei to broadcast into the, surrender. There's no, there's no way out. What are you doing? And none of them come out. They kill everybody inside, and then they obliterate the walls of Intramuros and go in there and have to, kill everybody there. It's like, I think that the Japanese called it Gyoko Kusai, which is, the ultimate, Armageddon death, for this.
I remember this would have been about 10 years ago. I thought that the defenders were Japanese Marines, because I knew that so many of them, the Japanese naval forces were there. And then obviously there's no Japanese Marines. That wasn't really a thing at
Yeah, I
that
think there's,
time.
there's elements that, had been on those ships that were all, lost, and some of those, they could consider marine, because there's crew members from the Yamato, that had, or not the Yamato, but the Musashi, that had sunk down in the Sibuyan Sea, during the Battle of Leyte Gulf. So it's just this conglomerate of people that they pulled together that have decided they're going to fight to the death, and they're going to kill every, Filipino with them.
Yeah, it's incredibly just insane in my mind that you have this group that is not really trained so much in this ground combat,
Yeah.
and yet they are able, I think, just through force of will and through all the stuff they've been able to pull off all of these ships, these anti-aircraft, whatever they've got. I mean, they use it to such a terrible degree that it just, and then obviously the Americans have to respond, and you end up with this beautiful city and these, hundreds of thousands of people and so many rapes, so many atrocities. I mean, it's why do you think many people don't know a lot about this battle then? If it is so horrific, why?
Well, it's you see the World War II histories, and 800 pages are Europe and 150 pages are the Pacific. And it's usually the Marine battles, that take it all. And Battle of Manila, there's only a handful of books about it. I mean, there've been some really great books written in the Philippines. And then there's been, just a couple here. And I think the last one, was Jim Scott's, Rampage, which was, focused, mainly on just the horrible atrocities, that happened during this battle. So it's just something that, when we teach it here, most people have never, they don't know anything about it. They know MacArthur landed at Leyte, but that was about it.
And we've had people ask us too, is this comparable to Stalingrad? Is this the version of that in the Pacific Theater. And I mean,
or
obviously,
Warsaw. Yeah,
yeah,
the
I mean,
war, and that's what they call it, the Warsaw of the Pacific. And outside of those early Japanese campaigns in China, with like Nanking and Shanghai. I mean, it's really the only major city battle, that takes place in the Pacific. But a lot of those guys that we knew over the years that would come here, First Cavalry guys, they would say, they didn't understand the war until they got to Santo Tomas, and then they were like, oh, okay, now it all makes sense.
mhm.
Yeah.
So you mentioned Rampage, Jim Scott's book.
Yeah.
What other books would you recommend if people
Well,
want to learn more?
the Army Green series, Robert Ross Smith, Triumph in the Philippines. That's got some good materials in it. There's a Philippine book by Aluit, by Sword and Fire. That's a real good one too. Lawrence Cortese, I think Cortese, he did one, back in the 70s. And that was kind of it before Jim Scott. I mean, you had the one that was done by Richard Connaughton and Plimsoll, or another British guy in the 90s, but that one didn't carry across very well.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Okay.
but now you've got a number of good sources, and I think with the 80th anniversary, you've got a number of other ones coming out that are basically about the Philippine campaign, not so much just about Manila, but you've got other sources coming out.
Any final thoughts?
No, the the numbers, that they always say, about Manila, and Rick Mikesell of Harrisonburg just did that study that he did. And he talked with all those people that worked with Robert Ross Smith in that Green series, Triumph in the Philippines. And they said that that number of 100,000 was kind of crafted. It wasn't from any source or anything. The war crimes trials, they said that civilians killed in the Philippines numbered to about 78,000 total, for the whole war. So, what the numbers are, we don't really know. The Philippine Civil Affairs units, they said they picked up 1,800 bodies on the streets. 1,800 of civilians. And if you got 100,000 people that died in this conflict, you would think it would be a lot more. Maybe, but I don't know. It was horrific, and we know that in the tens of thousands, Filipinos were massacred. This, and a lot of them by American artillery. It's a hard fact, but Robert Beetler, who ran that 37th Division, said, I wasn't going to save a bunch of buildings and have to go home to tell some Ohio mother that her son got killed because we wanted to save this building. And so they obliterated everything.
Mhm. Very, very difficult story.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank
Another fun time at MacArthur Memorial.
right. Thank you, Jim, for your time today and for your expertise as always.